Today we're going to be continuing the series Lessons from the Lamb, and particularly the Beatitudes. Now we're coming to the end. We have about two more uh, days where we're going to be exploring the Beatitudes, that's including today. And so we're kind of coming to this inflection point where God is going to be calling us to do more on his behalf. Okay. Now, today it's going to be verse 10, Matthew 5, verse 10, where blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, being persecuted for righteousness might look a little bit different than it did in first century AD. Okay. Um, Persecuted in Paul's time and Jesus' time would have been suffering up unto the point of death, right? Death could be a possibility there. In fact, John, um, the baptizer, is beheaded and messages sent back to Jesus. So there's this idea that persecution could, cost your life. Now, like I said, it's not nearly the same for us, but I want you to imagine for a second that you all have a job as an assistant to the CEO of a large corporation, okay? And you know that the CEO has been embezzling money. In fact, he's been doing it for years, and you've been knowing, uh, and you're caught at an inflection point here. The CEO tells you that you're going to be fired if you open your mouth to anyone. What do you do? What do you do? Well, you have two options, okay? First option is you keep your mouth shut. You don't say anything. You turn a blind eye. You act like you know nothing. Never heard about it. Don't know about it. Don't know where the money came from, where it's going. Don't know anything, right? You get to keep your job. And you probably get preferential treatment from the boss because he knows that you can take him down at any moment in time. And he probably rewards you with a generous bonus every week to keep that under grips. Or you have option two, all right? And you alert the board of his or her wrongdoing. You most likely lose your job. You spend months trying to find another one. And in doing so, you go through this time of stress and depression. Bills are piling up because you don't have a job here, and unemployment just doesn't cut it. You're left. You have these two options. For doing the right thing, it feels like you're going to be left down and out, right? However, these are the exact situations that Jesus is saying that we are going to be in. And he's asking us to respond by doing the right thing. Now, continuing on that series, like I said, we started off with Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we talked about the spiritual cup that we need to make sure it is empty of all of the other things of life in order for God to be able to pour into it. Then we talked Matthew 5:4, blessed are those who mourn, and this idea that there might be times in life where we're going to have to make decisions for Jesus, and it's going to cause us to have to mourn a life that we could have had but we didn't take because we knew it was the wrong thing to do, right? And we know that God is going to comfort us. And then we have blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, and this idea that obedience to God, right, and and this humility to others and to God is going to lead us into a relationship with others that in turn we can bring to God. And then we had blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And we talked about this need to see justice and righteousness in the world, and that God was going to satisfy us with that but we needed to make sure that, that is what we were aiming towards so that we can be fulfilled. Then it was, blessed are the merciful, for they shall be receive mercy. And this idea that we can empathize and sympathize with people to help them going throughout lives and showing them mercy when they've done us wrong, because in fact God has shown us mercy, and more, our fellow Christians will show us mercy when we also do them wrong, because we are sinful beings. And then we talked, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And we talked about this idea of being pure in heart is more than just being morally um, good. It was talking about having this deep passion for God, all right, and wanting to have a relationship with Him. And then we had, blessed are the peacemakers last week, for they shall be called sons of God. And we talked about how peace is something that is active, not passive, something that requires us to go out of our way, but it is a reflection of God, just like sons are reflections of their fathers. And so this week, it is, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now you have to ask yourself, if you are in this scenario with the CEO, why would God ask us to do something that is likely going to harm ourselves or our way of life? It's going to put us through a difficult scenario. I will say that losing your job, being fired from your job, does not seem like a blessing from God. In fact, it may feel like that you were being cursed for doing the right thing, that you were punished for doing the right thing. And I want you to know there is a blessing. It's important to remember that God is always in control behind the scenes. We need to look to Him working in our lives. See, because maybe God needs to close this door in order for another door to open. I've been in this scenario in my life, right? Where God had to close a door in order for a new door to be opened so that I can continue doing His will and His work and what He wants me to do. Maybe He's going to reward you with like a higher paying job or a more enjoyable job. In fact, the job that you were even at, you didn't like that much, right? God's going to bring about something in your life, right? But he has to close these doors to do so. Or maybe God is attempting to teach you a lesson. Maybe He's asking you to take a step of faith and believe that He is the one and true orchestrator of things, and that you just need to trust in Him. Or maybe even more abstractly, God is trying to use you to work in somebody else's life. See, 1 Peter 3 says, starting in verse 8, talks about suffering for righteousness. And in 1 Peter 3:15 it says, "But in your hearts honor Christ, the Lord, as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." Maybe God is calling you to have to suffer on His behalf in order to allow you to be able to work in other people's lives, because they're going to look at you and they're going to say, "Hey, Chris, how do you continue to be happy when these doors keep closing behind you because you're doing the right thing for God?" And it allows you to make this defense for Christ when you're questioned. They might ask you, why would anybody do that? Why would you do that? Why? They see it from the first option here, that you have a great paying job, right? You're going to get preferential treatment, right? You're going to get these additional bonuses from the boss, quote unquote. Why would anybody do that? Why would you risk your livelihood for God? And I'm going to tell you here, right? It is going to seem countercultural. When you do things for Jesus, right? It is going to put you out of a comfort zone that is going to make you look so strange to anybody from the outside looking in. And it goes completely against our culture. It says, uh, the culture says that everybody should be looking out for themselves, right? It says, mind your own business. I'm going to do what's right for me, right? And if it means that I have to lie or I have to conceal something like embezzlement from the CEO, well, I'm just going to do that. And so when we are countercultural, when we go against that inherent nature that says, I'm going to do things for myself, people pay attention, guys. People pay attention. And when people pay attention, Peter says, they will begin to ask us about that hope. That hope that allows us to give up our jobs. That takes a lot of hope. Or that hope that allows us to do the right thing, even when the outcome is going to be consequential to our lives. When we have to go home and tell our spouse that we got fired because we decided to do the right thing. But this is when we are able to start sharing the gospel with people, guys. When we are able to change the minds and hearts of those around us, begins right here. And more than that, suffering for righteousness mimics Christ. 1 Peter 3:18 says, "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteousness for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but being made alive in the spirit." Christ died for righteousness, or died in righteousness for the unrighteous. Christ suffered for doing the right thing. He was the ultimate sufferer, the ultimate sacrifice. He suffered so that we can be made right with God and live a life with Him. So, what does it mean to be rewarded the kingdom of heaven? Well, guys, this is a repeat of Matthew 5:3. And to divine this is to understand that the reward of putting all faith in the Father, right? We receive this eternity with God, which is contrary to the eternity that the others receive, right? Which is to eternal separation from God. And our goal is to bring as many people to Christ as possible. See, you not only need to receive the reward of being reunited with the Father, but also to share that reward with others. When we suffer for righteousness' sake, we are able to talk to others and explain to others why they should join us. Right? When they see our hope, they will follow us. And I find it interesting that we get this repeat right before Jesus' ending verse that will encompass the overarching theme of being a Christian. A literary sandwich is common to highlight the information in this section, right? He's going to give us lessons in verses 3 through 10 and then summarize it all again next week, verses 11 and 12.